This is Maya Fey. Maya is the heart and soul of Ace Attorney. Her presence being the sassy yet positive assistant with a history of loss, trauma, and self-doubt is integral to the entire world of Ace Attorney, with her familial history directly tied to the events that began hers and many other characters' journeys. And Maya clearly became very popular, to the point that Capcom looked at her success and thought, what if we kept doing it? And since then, every Ace Attorney game has continued adding these so-called Mayas. A younger, upbeat girl with deep interpersonal trauma, integral narrative ties, and a taboo role. Obviously, all these characters have their own unique stories and developments, but at their core, they are in some way replications of that Maya formula. Like, we all know Maya as a spear medium, but we also have Maya but younger, Maya as a forensic student, Maya as a magician, Maya as a great thief, Maya as a dude, Maya as a psychologist, Maya as a royal heir, Maya during the Salem witch trials. But what if we made Maya a lawyer? Meet Susato Mikotoba. She's the ultimate, I'm not like you other girls of our Maya bunch. She has all the legal knowledge from 2 unique countries and legal systems, and has practically passed the bar at the age of 16. Probably because of her book of limitless knowledge, because who needs ChatGPT? But a lot of what makes Susato great isn't isolated to her being actually helpful legally. I think that diminishes what makes Susato and your Maya-like characters individually great. Because in many regards, Susato retains a lot of those Maya qualities. She's jovial, emotional, kind of impulsive and reactive. Susato's obsession over Herlock Sholmes is similar, if not maybe even more passionate than Maya is to the Steel Samurai. So she isn't some legal pariah like how Maya isn't a perfect Master Karain or Kei isn't the greatest thief Yatagarasu. Because we have to remember, she's still a high schooler. And this establishes the central quality that ties all of these Maya archetypes together. Self-doubt in the face of overwhelming responsibility. Whether it's being the heir to a clan of spear mediums, continuing a legacy of noble thieves, or proving yourself capable of being a lawyer. All that stress of responsibility while still in their developmental years. Trying to make the most of their youth and suddenly we're doomed with government conspiracies, familial politics, active lives on the line, and perennial tragedy. All linked to that immense responsibility you've suddenly been thrust upon. And because of that, how does one live up to those expectations from others, but mostly from yourself? This true dilemma plagues Susato and her journey in this adventure. She clearly desires for more, but whether due to societal expectations or Susato restricting herself due to her literal role as an assistant, she limits or doubts her abilities. She's on top of everything, is the most observant and emotionally mature of our cast, yet she's still privy to youthful and impulsive tendencies which she subsequently blames herself for. And her history of a turbulent family environment has her trying to discover her own sense of belonging. But faced with even more conflicts, deaths, and other strenuous events, it's difficult for her to find that family. Find that love, find that trust, not just in others, but in herself. All these 3 parts of her story, Susato as a legal assistant, Susato as a woman, and Susato as Susato. All these parts relay a story of self-doubt and discovering that self-worth, self-love. And eventually, finally being comfortable being herself and trusting her skill and maturity. And through it all, bringing herself to open up to a newfound family. Susato's story is a complicated journey of a restricted society, turbulent social life, and outside events contributing and heightening conflicts of self-worth and general imposter syndrome. In a game with a lot of loud personalities, trauma-filled backstories, and one grand adventure, Susato's quiet role in this packed narrative becomes one of the most essential. And soon enough, she finds herself finally having her voice be heard. The best way to introduce Susato is that she is incredibly efficient. In fact, our first true introduction to Susato is her providing a crucial piece of evidence that would convict Brett. In every case since, she's just a straight baller in the courtroom. No matter if it's overlooked details in the evidence or unearthing decades retired trial practices, nothing escapes her gaze. Not only that, she has an incredibly blunt, no-nonsense type demeanor when trying to extract information. She was that towards Ryunosuke when we were accused of murdering Kazuma, but also sends with all of our clients no matter if it's Gina, Hairbrain, the Reaper, the Bailey, her father. She doesn't care who you are besides Sholmes. She will interrogate you all the same, all while giving us a Ryunosuke the necessary amounts of encouragement. It makes sense, she's a judicial assistant after all. She's not meant to be a cheerleader, if anything she's more capable than us. She's proven it herself, going undercover as a lawyer and very much holding her own. She has the wits to face off against the sleaziest prosecutor and ability to chuck fully grown men over her shoulder on a dime. And through it all, she's been just the sweetest, most considerate character in the game. Susato throughout the narrative has shown to be a stellar asset. And therein lies her biggest flaw. That she is just an asset. The role she's been assigned since the very beginning was to be an assistant. To be there to help collect evidence, read all the case files, understand the law, and guide us along. That's her sole purpose, and like I said, she does it well. Extremely well, really. But it comes at a cost that she believes her only purpose is to assist. And that presumption causes so much unnecessary stress that any flaw, any mistake, any genuine urge is a weakness, a moment of failure. Even in her first and last stint as a lawyer, she was timid, nervous, freezes under pressure. She has all the knowledge, ability, and trial experience of the most capable of lawyers. It's just, this is a stressful position, and also that she's 16! Or her accusing Ryunosuke for murdering their best friend, or tampering with a live crime scene because she was worried about her newly found friend. There's so many instances where she doubts her abilities, her capabilities of being a judicial assistant, or reluctance to be vulnerable and open about her own plights, let alone all the external factors with the familial problems in it being the early 1900s. She restricts herself by not even a glass ceiling, a glass box, that she isn't good enough. Yes, tampering with a crime scene or berating someone for being the killer when they weren't isn't the most ideal. But also those youthful, no, human desires aren't a weakness. It's not something to throw away her career over, something she literally tried to do. It's a perpetual cycle that she continues to face throughout the story. There's one behavior in particular I noticed following my Kazuma video, where Susato and likewise Ryunosuke often diminish their own achievements while spotlighting their own flaws to uplift someone else and their capabilities. Susato does that with Ryunosuke, and Ryunosuke does that with Kazuma. Call it being humble, but I see it as something else. A lack of trust. It's easier to praise others and criticize ourselves when we see our own flaws, but continually demeaning yourself shows a lack of confidence, a lack of trust in themselves, and in the case of Susato, trusting others. Especially the worst parts of the people she was tasked to assist. These trust issues plague her own confidence in herself, but it causes her to be afraid of making those said mistakes. She doesn't trust that if and when she falters, those around her would still be there for her. Not unless you Susato take down her 5 times in a row for her comeuppance. It reaches to a point she diminishes her own achievements, the amount of times she came through with crucial pieces of evidence or got through to a stubborn witness, her recognizing the dark sides to a corrupt legal system and deciding to take action. To, for once in her life, break the rules to seek truth and justice. There's so many times she's just a straight badass. But it's so ingrained into her to do everything by the book and never falter from it that she was so ready to throw it all away. And that's the thing. No matter how confident, how competent, how confrontational she has been, that slight bit of self-doubt will always be her biggest weakness. There's a certain distinction between Susato as a legal assistant and Susato as Susato. In law form, she's thorough, comforting, passionate, proactive. Absolutely no nonsense, like a mother scolding Ryunosuke to not drink poison. But on the other side, we have Susato. or in terms of the previous section, her weakness. Here, she's emotional, reserved, antsy, reactive. Despite being the proprietor for the truth, she's still prone to lie, conceal, and withhold. These two sides of her legal and human sides, constantly clash that offer an interesting predicament. Most evidently came with her witnessing Kazuma's sudden revival. Yes, he's somehow alive, don't question it. The shock of seeing someone you saw their cold, lifeless corpse suddenly staring you right in the face in front of you? In her head, she doesn't know what to do. All the evidence leading up to this moment tells her the truth, to the point that the truth is literally staring her in the face. Yet, in her head, she's scared. Scared of the truth. Struggling to comprehend how and why someone she saw dead now alive in front of her, and the implications that would lead if that really was the truth. But Susato, being the proactive legal assistant she is, she just goes for the throat. This one moment is so satisfying because 1, we instantly get the truth, but 2, we know the internal war that was going inside of her head. She knows the truth and what's right in front of her, yet she hesitates. What if she's wrong? What if she got her hopes up and it only sinks her even further down? For a moment, she wanted to keep quiet, albeit for a mere second, but that slight reservation, that human side of her thought to not unravel the truth, to preserve that mystery and save herself from further heartache. Yet, she tackles it head on. Moments like this are why I find Susato to be such an incredible character. We go through an entire adventure with the best legal assistant we could ever have, but paired with those slight moments of humility, slowly revealing the struggles and emotions she often conceals, we learn so much more about Susato that we appreciate her even more outside of her legal assistant role. This could have just been the badass girl boss moment from Susato, but knowing all the internal conflict she must have faced elevates an already great moment tenfold. And as aforementioned, Kazuma's return would cause even more questions, because it means people have lied. Herlock, Strongheart, Mikotoba, maybe even several others. And this moment plays with who Susato can trust, or if she can trust herself to determine who and what is being truthful. When she couldn't even trust her own instincts that maybe Kazuma could have been alive, when she's already questioning her qualifications of being a judicial assistant. Trust and the constant distrust in herself and others has been a persistent issue for her. A part of her still poisoned by her rather tumultuous past. Since she was born, she's faced a rather turbulent household. Her mother died shortly after childbirth, and unfortunately right after, her father took off to study abroad, leaving a young Susato without either of her parents. For 6 years, she was raised by her grandmother until her father returned from London. However, this return didn't come without even more turmoil, as shortly after, Kazuma would be taken in by Yujin after the deaths of his parents. And soon, Susato would be tasked to help Kazuma in any way possible, later being appointed to be his official legal assistant. Obviously, she's doing well for herself. She's incredibly bright, curious, and thoughtful. She's taking up hobbies like martial arts and reading, and she's made friends, particularly with Kazuma and Rei. Yet, being raised in an empty household for a third of her life, and since living through assisting someone else, coupled with the restrictive expectations of women at the time, Susato was left with little to nothing of her own autonomy, let alone a proper family life. Her intellect in a way has come to her own detriment, in which she believes she's only valuable because of said intellect, not her caring attitude or equally ambitious aspirations or radical beliefs. She's loyal in the best and worst ways, where she is so helpful and sweet, but is also willingly chained herself to someone else and not letting herself fly independently. It's a backstory that, while not immediately recognized, becomes clear to have somehow impacted Susato and her social and personal life. Certainly her father has recognized it, with him expressing regret and remorse for the situation he willingly or unwillingly placed Susato in till now. Him abandoning Susato in a time of grief for the both of them, and feeding persistent lies and concealing information from her that, While he saw his protection, with how smart Susato is almost betraying and degrading even. It's hard to claim that Mikotoba has been an awful father, but even he would admit he's contributed to some of Susato's struggles with connectivity and insecurity that he himself is trying to mend. At this point in the narrative, Susato has certainly evolved. As she learns more of the dark secrets that the Japanese and English governments are concealing, the more determined she becomes to expose that truth. But the deeper she pries into the darker crevices of the world, the more the world challenges Susato's entire perspective of that. And nothing will truly challenge this as much as what comes next. I've mentioned in his own video how much impact Kazuma had on all of the characters. How this revelation shifted the entire landscape of our own perceptions on everyone. Like that brother you once looked up to and aspired to be. The one who was invaluable and everyone loved having around and who could do no wrong. And then they turned out to be a cold-blooded killer. And ever since then, he seems like an entirely different character. His demeanor, his attitude, his behavior, nothing was who we once saw. But in reality, it was all in plain sight since the beginning. The cracks in the armor were there, and now they have eroded to expose the true nature of what we once looked up to. For Susato, this slow unraveling of her entire life was devastating. Remember, her sole purpose even before this study trip was to be Kazuma's assistant. She trained and studied ever since she was 6 to welcome and help him. Her whole life became centered around Kazuma, and even after his false death, she worked under the pretense that she would help continue Kazuma's soul along this journey. And for her to witness that same man she brought in to be an older brother to her, for him to come back from beyond the grave a disheveled, vindictive, hateful man, abandoning his entire being to bring change and uplift the weak to become a vengeful prosecutor. Her entire purpose was to assist in the study abroad, only for it to turn out to be a veil for a much more sinister plot. And she was unwillingly a key cog in this murderous scheme. But before all of that, we still have the events prior to Kazuma's reveal. I did want to come back to this because despite all the turmoil she faced, this is probably the most confrontational and forward she's been in the entire game. Not hesitating to call out Van Zeeks or Herlock despite the amount of anguish she's clearly going through. It's an aspect I just love about her. It says a lot about her strength and resilience. She wanted to know everything and she sugarcoated nothing. Even if, until his official reveal, her heart was perpetually in pain. The fact that she recognizes and knows the man behind the mask, yet that masked man doesn't recognize her back. And yet, ironically, it was really her who didn't recognize the man behind the mask after all. Because Kazuma has changed. Or rather, we finally got to see the true colors of him. Kazuma has always been a fascinating figure because since his passing, he was a figure it seemed Ryunosuke and Susato were continually trying to chase. A ghost that felt somehow even more alive following his death. But ever since his revival, he's the complete opposite. Almost like he's possessed. When really, it was just a cognitive dissonance shielding us from believing that this was his true self. It's not just Kazuma, people she's had a working relationship with like Gregson or Strongheart to a direct personal connection with someone like Jigoku or Mikotoba. All of these people had dark secrets stringing her along on this adventure. And it became a lot for her. The entire reason for her reaching this far into her journey was to revive Kazuma's dream. And she clearly looked up to him a lot. But now knowing his true ambitions were a lot more sinister than she realized, what now? Her whole purpose was built upon a lie. So then, what is the truth? What is the truth to who Susato is? What is the truth to Susato's success? What is the truth that brought Susato this far into her journey? And the truth is, it's her. It has always been her. Her choices, her emotions, her actions are the reason we made it this far into the narrative. The countless times she's been there to support, guide, and lead investigations and trials. There was no Cosmo meddling or Cosmo influence. Everything leading up to this point was because of her. And it's not just that, who were the people there for her through it all? Because it certainly wasn't Cosmo, but it was all the people and friends she's met along the way. The people who recognized and trusted Susato and her expertise, the friends who appreciated every moment spent with her, and a family that, despite the tragedies, despite the troubles, despite the lies and deceit, they still trusted her and never left her behind. There was no Cosmo or outside force that brought her to this point. It was all her. Her and her newly found family. And nothing is more evident of this than her very last moments. Once again, she was tasked to assist Cosmo, and with him now being alive, she will be back to being Cosmo's assistant. But times have changed, and over her year-long venture with Ryunosuke, she realized that this role she was assigned since her youth wasn't the story she wants to be. And in the final moments before Ryunosuke would take off back to Japan, she approaches Cosmo and informs him that she wants to leave with Ryunosuke instead. The partner she truly has stuck thick and thin with, the friend who she helped train from a basic English student to the ace attorney that just dismantled the British legal system, and the one that she shared this adventure with as they discovered their true calling in this world. She does it in the most Susato way, overly considerate and apologetic, but in the end, her heart desires something different than her task, and instead of bottling herself into that role, she finally decides to chase what she wants. And even in their final moments, despite Susato being terribly humble about her talents, she still remains the utmost prepared, loading her luggage and booking her ticket before Ryunosuke even realizes. A moment I think perfectly sums up Susato. Susato's inclusion in this game is so special. She could have been yet another goofy, Maya-like assistant, the sassy one-liners, consistent damsel in distress, and the interlaced trauma that comes with it. But none of those apply directly to her. She's not the core of the main overarching narrative. In fact, she barely has any ties to the central conflict. So it would have been so easy for her to fall into just being an asset, having her shut up and play her role. But Susato feels like the heart of the game. She's her sidekick in all the trials, but she very much feels like the main character in many different ways. She has the initiative, the passion, the knowledge to point out details before Ryunosuke and us can even recognize. In fact, the problem I found making this video was that there was just too many great moments of Susato taking charge, helping us out, or just exuding confidence and grandeur that I couldn't list or analyze each one. She's able to not just be our guide to this grand world, but connect and engage us with it and all of its characters, all while maintaining her professionalism to help support her clients and Ryunosuke and others. Despite the several emotions clearly swirling inside of her, she knows how to put them all aside and go right back to helping. But through it all, we got to connect to Susato, understanding her insecurities and flawed mentality, or just being too humble and self-deprecating when we all know how outstanding she is. And despite her strength, finally throughout the game, she learns to loosen up, to be more vulnerable and emotive when she has gone through a lot. Being able to experience her professional and soft sides makes both parts of her that much more compelling, all while seeing her properly balance to both as time goes on. Not to mention seeing Susato and Ryunosuke complement each other's growths, experiencing them mutually build their confidence and ambition in life. I will have to make a video about Ryunosuke and his incredible adventure, but also, he and Susato have such similar and interconnected developments, it's hard to tell his story without mentioning Susato. As for Susato, her biggest growth in this story was the idea of trust. Trust is such an important thing in Ace Attorney, it's our biggest strength. But not often tackled is the trust in oneself. Knowing that you are great enough, that you have the skills to trust yourself in your role, and trust yourself to trust others. And we get to see that confidence emerge in her throughout. She's always been a proactive and confrontational assistant, But a different level of energy surged the deeper we got into the narrative. There was no more doubting, no more hesitation. She was confident, she was observant, and she was a stone cold killer. In a turn of fate, before it felt like her encouragement and assistance was merely out of her assigned role. But now, she's assisting and helping not because of an arbitrary role, but because that's just who Susato is. A sweet, hardworking, caring soul. To end this video off, there is one final moment that is probably my favorite from Susato. That would be her realization and confrontation of her father being Shom's partner. It sums up a lot of the best parts of Susato's character and growth. On one hand, she's happy to learn her father is somehow the great partner and friend to Herlock Sholmes, who she has been fangirling for the entire narrative. But mutually, the notion that Mikotoba may have had and left behind a child shortly after her mother's passing troubles her. And so those emotions, those questions, are what she immediately expresses. The joy of her father's misadventures, but grilling and even threatening him on the secrets that he may continue to conceal. Yet, despite not getting her answer immediately, she still gives the benefit of a doubt to her father. The man that, despite his lies, despite not being the perfect father, she still trusts him. After a year full of mysteries and secrets compounding on top of each other, she still gives a little bit of trust to Mikotoba that soon he will tell her the truth. And that little bit of belief is all we can give to those we trust the most. Whether it's her father or Rinosuke, Kazuma, Herlock, etc. Trusting that the truth will be told and it'll be a lot less dark as we may believe. And at that point, Mikotoba knew he raised the best daughter ever. And that is what makes Susato truly great. Thanks for watching.